Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ bá jó, olúwa mi ò dìde ojú
The Ashen Forge. The Ashen Forge.
Hello and welcome to the Ashen Forge. I am Phantom X, joined as always by Diggs and the legendary Neurotoxin. How are you two doing?
Great. All right. We're just about at the end of the year here.
Yeah, for us, this is... Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, for us, this is the last show of the year. We will not be here next Sunday, as that is Christmas Day. And if we do a show, the next one will be actually the new year. So...
I am, Neuro had mentioned last time getting the, needed to grab that forest cloak before it went away, and I was going to do it right after the show and then forgot.
Oh, no.
But I got the notice for the new items coming up. There was an hour left. I got that through the Discord notification. I was like, but now. So I did grab the cloak like 1 hour before it went away. So
I did not purchase any of it.
All new wintry items in the shop, I think, at the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, which if we have time to talk about, we certainly can. I thought it would maybe be fun to kind of do a year-end kind of thing go over. This is year 6, believe it or not. Yes, Kickstarter started in 2017, and I just verified this. If you go into Discord, search old messages from Steven, really the first wave of information was December 10th, 2016. And they actually commented on things like Combat, a Metropolis they shared that they had created at that time. It's amazing to see how things have progressed in 6 years. But yes, it has been 6 years. So, yeah. Any initial thoughts? I was just going to go through each month, each dev stream, essentially. And kind of cover, but I don't know. We've had a year. Anything that sticks out to either of you?
They've shown a lot more systems. They've shown a lot more of all the races, and there wasn't really a whole lot of players jumping in and playing.
Very true. Actually, this time last year, the December update was the UE5 update, which I am actually including because they are having another. December 23rd, they are having a dev stream. But since we will not be doing that probably till 1/1 at the earliest, I did include that, which December would have been UE5 transition.
Yeah, and things have been looking great. And from the sound of things, there are a lot of tools that we're going to be, a lot better from switching over to that, like the ability for people, just for people who haven't really done much with game development, understand for most of what has been game development up to this point, the map, the big map of a world or whatever large chunks and regions, by and large, had to be checked out and checked in order to have anybody work on it and not have two different versions that will not merge together, and you got to just throw away one of the two people's work. It sucks. It really sucks. If you're doing stuff with like maybe Melscript, for example, you might be able to get away with like doing a code merge, but I don't know that you're going to be making an entire game world in Melscript. That's a big ask. That'd be a real niche way to do things. So what Unreal 5 brings to the table that had not previously been available for most developers on most games, most studios, is the ability for multiple people to work on the terrain, work on the world map in various sections and chunks and areas, especially considering all the different tiers and transitions are essentially different layers. So not just the sort of core world, but all of the variations that can be applied and exist there, that you wouldn't be able to make any of those changes while somebody else is working on it. And to think of how much you have to like segment everything in order to allow forward progress of multiple world designers at a given time. No more, no more. Unreal 5 allows them to get over that. And in fact, the 5.1 update that they've been talking about recently, it sounds like it further improves upon those tools and gives even more features and streamlining for it. So that's fantastic. It was a good move to make. It sounds like, visually and technically, it's been, fantastic for everything we see in the game, and everything they're doing at the studio, it sounds like, is just going a lot better using the new tools and new features that are available. And it still runs on, mid-tier hardware. You don't have to go get a new system if you've got something, decent that you built in the past 5 years or so. It's still going to be able to run the game. So that was really a big sort of thing. And so it's not like taking two authors' writings. It's like, okay, we'll take this part and this part. It's really there's no way to mash the visual files like that together in a simple way, short of a system that's actually built for it.
Yeah. In hindsight, I know we had a lot of discussion when they announced this moving over about time delays and what would that add to the development cycle. I think we all assumed it would be worth it, but the question to the additions, I would be really curious. Hopefully, we get a chance to talk to Stephen sometime in the relative near future, because I'm curious after that switch how quickly things actually picked up for them. Like once it was completely implemented, how much time savings did it actually end up being? Because we look at what's been released and we'll go through each month. There's still a lot of stuff out there. So now it's sort of, in hindsight, it's kind of like, well, maybe it wasn't actually that big of a deal because they were.
Well, I think when I was thinking about it a year ago, I was expecting to have Alpha 2 before the summer. So I don't know what Steven would say, but I was not expecting more than a year and a half between Alpha 1 and Alpha 2. And it looks like it's going to be at least 2 years between Alpha 1 and Alpha 2. And, originally it was supposed to be released before 2020. So um, it's a significant delay in my mind, even though we don't have a release date, up to the point where, so because they said release was going to be before 2020, I was thinking they would still be wanting um, release to kind of be before 2023. I mean, if it's before 2020, you really expect it's going to be before 2023, and it's not. Alpha 2 isn't even before 2023. So, I mean, to me, it's a significant delay. Just now we don't have a release date at all. So I don't know. Everything's off the table in terms of release.
Yeah. And we can get to what our predictions and hopes are for 2023 here once we get through all these. Now moving to Unreal, what is it, 5.1? Curious, what that will end up adding in the long run, because that also I think is taking until mid-January is what they had mentioned. It was their sort of estimation. But that takes us into January, which was the first time I think we got to see the VEC. That was a big part of what they showed. They showed all of, the VEC, the Rinkai, Nakua, Dunir, and Kalar. But I believe VEC was sort of the first really good look we got to see at them. I know I'm excited from what they've shown. And then we've subsequently seen the VEC and some other videos as well.
Yeah, VEC are very different than what I was expecting. I don't know that I would think of them as an orc if I, wasn't told previously that VEC were a type of orc. If you just show, I mean, I almost think that they should just go by their names instead of orc and dwarf. and Elf. They should just go by Vec and Nakua and all that, and we can kind of decide what they are. But yeah, very different than what I would have thought of as a orc, but they look cool.
Yeah, everything I've seen almost reminds me of a goblin more than anything. But we've been.
I don't know, all the like tribal and the celestial theme to them. Definitely, it's a very strong contrast to the Renkai, that you've got more of your traditional big, strong, tough, proud sort of orc, with more of like a Eastern sort of flair to their styles and attire, and the Vec. Just so completely different, and it's one of the things that I don't know how much they mean to have a strong contrast between the different races, because we have like the elves. They distinctly look pretty different from one another. There's some similarities in some of the features, but by and large they don't look like they came from the same mama. The Vec and Renkai, especially from the examples we've seen, you're right, they don't entirely look related. And the Nakua and Dunir, we've seen a little bit more variation. They look like they could be family, but kind of distant cousins. The builds and the shapes and like the proportions and things are fairly different between sorry, I see that gesture looked a little funny. The proportions, not the proportions. I realized that kind of came through a little funny on the camera there. That, and then all of it to kind of come back to Kalar and Valoon, and the final reveal for that, or at least the most recent one. And okay, there's a little bit of difference. The ears may be a little pointy, but otherwise it still barely straddles the line between human and also human. And I feel like that was the thing that they were setting out to break away from initially, was what features of existing real world humans go into this one versus this one, and realizing that's a ridiculous sort of thing to do, pushing one to having more of the variation. So there's still more of like the magical scarring and outbursts and stuff that we would be seeing on the skin and maybe hair and other parts of the Valoon that we haven't seen yet. But for what we have seen, it's a step in the right direction, but it's still, just a step. And I know like they haven't done the full reveal. They've just given us a little bit. So, that's fine. That's what we've gotten this year for them. And then of course the Tulnar.
Mm-hmm.
They were just going to show a toe and we got the whole thing.
No, I think it's still just a toe. We still need to see more of the variations. I think we have 3 kind of broad images, but and that's just the head, like or the right, just the
Yeah,
faces.
and we didn't.
I don't think.
And we didn't get to see. Well, we're kind of jumping ahead, but we also didn't get to see any of that within the creative character creator either. Too. So there was no.
Right.
So it really seemed we saw 3 different versions that were probably all created separately rather than with any kind of slider tool. Is my guess.
Well, it sounds like it's going to be some amount of like selecting more of the base features of like one of the categories and then augmenting it with a bit from the other ones. Like it feels like they want you to kind of fall into one of the 3 sort of versions of the Tulnar. I'm not sure that they're going to have you like truly exist as a continuum between the 3 and to be an even 33% balance of all of them.
So I think at the moment, I like what you said in the chat Phantom, what races have we seen in game? And I thought we had seen the new Dunir in one of the maybe like the September or October um demo, live stream. But someone said later that was an earlier version of in-game footage that included the Dunir. 'Cause they still seem tiny. So I'm wondering how much putting that with also just liking to see we'd like to see stuff in the character creator. Um, that would kind of be a thing. I would love to see that. I don't know how many races we're going to see for the beginning of Alpha 2. It might not be 8. Um, they might have 8 and leave the Tulnar for later. But I would like to see like moving towards like in the months ramping up. I would love to see them in the character creator before we get to Alpha 2 instead of waiting until Alpha 2 to see all of them. But again, that seems like it would I don't know when Alpha 2 is going to start, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be in the first quarter of 2023. It seems like there's a lot of stuff that they still need to show us in these live streams before they open up Alpha 2, just comparing to what they showed us ramping up to Alpha 1. But
Well, February they showed the Pyre, and then animal husbandry. So that was the main focus of the February stream, which the animal husbandry was interesting to see. Again, not something interesting to hear about. While we say they discussed it, we certainly I don't think saw much of the process at all. It was fun to hear about the 4 different mechanisms. So, you have your mounts, your pet, your combat pets, your livestock, and then your beasts of burden, as they called them. But not much actually, I think it's been said since then, as far as animal husbandry. And then we get to March and the character creator, which was probably their first big thing of the year. I think they've done several really nice things to see. This was probably the first. I'd put together a video actually of them talking about it. With what's his name, the artist that was first there that left. I can't remember his name.
Matt Broom.
Yes. Yes, they were all sitting in a room and sort of talking about what they wanted it to be, and then map that out with what he showed us. And it was actually really remarkable. The consistency that Steven has in his message and his site. For some things, we'll move when we move down the months, we'll see what's changed. But it was actually really remarkable seeing the consistency of 2016, 2017 conversations to what was put out on the content or the character creator in 2022. Really seems pretty neat. I'm wondering if that would have been possible without switching over to, what does UE5, UE4, UE5 bring to that realness?
it's mostly UE5, so it has most of the stuff I was hoping to see from UE5 character creation module.
Now, interestingly, one thing that's not come from that is we were, through that whole conversation was a discussion that we would get the character creator tool prior to Alpha 2. That question has come up multiple times, multiple places, the forums, Reddit, and sort of on people's wish lists, and has not been any conversation at all about it, interestingly. At least not that I'm aware of. Which means they're either still, I think, putting final touches on it, or they're just nowhere near Alpha 2. And so there's no reason to put it out just yet.
That's the second is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. I would imagine that's the sort of thing they're going to maybe start with the spot testing first before they even release it as a promotional tool, because make no mistake, it is a promotional tool. It's something to get in our hands, but it is also something to use as they had said in previous streams, that it's that marketing beat that once you've got it out there, it's outside of their control. So make sure that it's as good as possible. So whenever people take it and run with it, it's going to be the best showing that they can.
Yeah. I'm also wondering if part of it is trying to get the Tulnar in there, because also I think there would be a lot of complaints if they released it without having all of the races accounted for. But I agree.
Although, I mean, Tulnar is stretch goal, so I mean, it should
Yeah.
be okay to wait.
Well, should and what
Yeah.
people say is one thing.
Do we even know what races they plan to have in Alpha 2?
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
So, yeah, like they could easily roll out more races as it goes along because, surprise, it's a test. There's going to be wipes. So there's going to be plenty of chances for people to make new characters. I'm actually kind of hoping that Alpha 2 will show a little bit more of the difference and nuance and variation of the races from a mechanical level. Like, what, other than like the stat blocks being slightly different, what else is there to them? Because I think there was just a little bit of that with what race you picked would have a slightly different stat block as you level up, but that was really about it. The races weren't too specially different than one another in Alpha 1, so that's something I'm hoping we'll see, is not just the existence of them, but something to do more and make more and have it be more than just, oh well, you're one of these, therefore your attributes look like this and your houses look like that, and that's all you'll ever be. Like, that's, I'm definitely hoping to see more of the nuance and interesting things that each one will have to provide.
Yeah. I mean, I agree it's a big marketing tool as well. I mean, not just to those who have already backed, but I think it's something you put in the hands of everyone as just sort of a free download to entice them to actually buy into your game. I don't do a lot with character creators historically. Never really have. I'm more likely to hit randomize until I find something that looks halfway decent and then go for it. EverQuest 2 is probably a little bit different, but they also released theirs ahead of time. I'm pretty certain they had a character creator ahead of time. So I would be all over Ashes. So I have want to reach
Actually,
out to them because I have a lot of ideas to how to implement it into what I do in real life, but that's a different conversation. So
I spent a lot more time in the Dragonflight character creator than I was expecting to. Is it because I spent time on both the Drakthir version and on the human visage, and I was surprised by the different stuff I was able to do. So they should have at least that much in the Ashes character creator, especially with MetaHuman. What, they aren't using MetaHuman creator, but it's very similar to MetaHuman creator. I think the only thing that I didn't see in the uh Ashes one that I might have hoped for or might have liked to have, but I understand why they wouldn't, is being able to import a picture and then start your it would import and you could
yeah,
get pretty close to the picture and then you can kind of adjust. But yeah, I think you can do a lot of stuff with what they have right now. I'm very curious to see how much leeway you have with that for like a Vec or a Renkai. Like how close could you say, oh, that Vec obviously is trying to look somewhat like Michael Jackson or Larry Bird or you know um, some other celebrity. Um, but we'll see.
and then
And I wonder how much of if we get the character creator, how many months would that satisfy us in terms of delay for Alpha 2?
well,
I'm not sure that's the satisfy. It's more like a fun sort of thing to play with and make your variations and do like your little design a character contests and stuff. And so I think with that one, it's how much they want to engage with us with the tool. You just put the tool out there, but then it's going to be a while before we can actually play any of the characters. I suppose it could be something where somebody's, streaming the character creator, making like custom characters that they can, then send off the code or whatever for somebody else to use. I suppose with that, how much of it's going to be just the character creator, and then how much are we going to get to play with their attire as well? Because that would be another big part if it's character and like some colors and patterns and styles and stuff. Then yeah, that could probably open up some room for people to really spend some time, play with it. Could even see people doing like, I'll often shamelessly throw it out there. I steal from the lovely folks at Hero Forge by making a model in the style of the character I want to play in D&D, and then I take a snapshot of that, and that's my character model for D&D. It's like, that's my dude. And they very kind to not chase me down, because I don't think that'd be very easy, but it's a fun sort of thing. I like the idea of being able to, make and decorate the character and then just use the picture of that likeness for some completely other thing. I don't know about D&D, but if you use it for a Pathfinder campaign, Stephen would probably give a nod of approval.
Yeah. Then we get to April, and it was the event system overview, which I have to admit I really remember very little about. So I think they touched on a little bit of everything, not just sort of when we think of events like seasons, like Christmas, but just triggering events, local events, node, that sort of thing.
Well, the big example that they gave us was the goblins attacking, and I think one of the things that we came out of it thinking is, can we side with the goblins?
Right?
How can we befriend the goblins and maybe aid them? I guess based on what Steven said last month about not being able to heal NPCs, we won't be able to get too far with that. But I still would like to be able to use diplomacy. I prefer diplomacy to combat, so I would love to see. Why are the goblins attacking? Are they attacking just to attack, or are they attacking for a reason? And then, um, they might convince me that their reasoning is worthwhile.
Well, and we learned later that we can influence things too by like gathering and chopping down trees, and it sounds like a very interesting system. Again, not one that we saw active in game, but interesting concepts.
Oh yeah, April. I guess it was actually from the March one. Or maybe it was April when they showed the picture of the boat and then the giant raid boss thing that's looking to come up and just eat the whole thing. That sort of presentation of scale kind of makes me wonder how effective boats are even going to be against those kind of bosses.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, have they really even commented on, I mean, we're getting a little ahead, but on boat usage in raid bosses in the ocean? Like, has that even been really commented on?
I mean, they said that this was going to be basically a raid boss, and
well, but I mean, outside of just a platform for individuals to stand on, is the boat itself actually, has that been commented on with cannons and other sorts of things?
I believe so. I believe he's mentioned cannons and like strategies. I'm hoping that it's going to be like a ship combat sort of level of quality that, if you stack all of your guns on the right side and you're just trying to broadside them, going around in circles the whole time and keep the cannons pointing at them. I could see that sort of thing. Harpoons and other sorts of stuff. I believe there is some talk of that's gone on in the past year.
Oh, the legendary harpoon.
I was going to say, what month was that cosmetic?
Yep. The harpoon you can only ever wear. It's a special harpoon. It's so special you'll never throw it.
And then probably why I don't really remember much of the event system in April is because in May we then had seasons. So this sort of season tech was presented, which was actually pretty cool. Again, we got to see all of the progressions, spring, summer, winter, or fall, winter, storms moving through,
We didn't
wind.
really see summer. It kind of went from spring to fall to winter. There was allegedly a summer in there, but or maybe there wasn't. It just kind of went between three. It looked like.
Yeah, I would like to see some of the non-traditional seasons, because I think there is one that's they have magical storms and things like that. So I would love at some point to see some um fantasy style seasons that we don't see on Earth. Um
Yeah, sorry. Yep. Somebody beat me to it. There you go.
Yeah.
Just trying to get that chat out of there. I mean, there's some, some very interesting ways you can go with it. I think one of the things I commented on, there would be some, the potential for flooding, and would that impact, a dungeon that becomes available at some point? Does it freeze over, or do you actually get to access it because it's frozen? There's a lot of different ways. I'm very interested in how it plays with the crops. I don't think we've been told much about that. Now we know, with farming, that if you're next to a river, you get benefits because you have water access. So I would assume you could have benefits and or negatives to certain types of weather. I think the other thing that's really not been talked about is whether they will have sort of artificial zones and the weather kind of changes by zone, or whether it will be actually weather that goes across the entire continent. A storm starts in one place and ends up in another.
Well, I think it's going to be both. That there's going to be both the large scale sort of storms and the meteorological events that are going on, as well as more of the individual, like regional sort of representations that, even though a storm came through, that's not going to make California look like Colorado, for example. Like it's if it even snows here, it's not going to last that long in Southern California compared to, up in the cold Rockies, where it's got, a great environment to hang around for a season. So that's going to be the other part of it, is what the weather does to that area, but then also how that area actually accepts and responds to that weather. Some areas might flood, while other areas, finally got the water they desperately needed, and things are going to start shooting up. And then after the winds start coming 3 months later, and someone lights a spark, and then a wildfire occurs. Maybe that's a little too real life, but that's the sort of things that we could be seeing potentially.
some of that is the difference between weather and climate, though. Um so regional stuff and climate wise. I think maybe what Phantom is kind of thinking about is like the tornadoes that we have that are moving from state to state in the U.S. Can we track those? Right. We just had a magical storm, in the south, and could we say, "Oh, you better prepare in the north or on the northeast," because I don't know. And how long do seasons last? It's like a week. Is it a week per season?
Yeah,
Something like
I
that.
think
So,
that's where they were going to start. That had not been decided completely.
hmm.
There were a couple of parts to it too, because it sounds like some use of weather was going to be as the season transition effect. So there's these like forced weather events that will occur every time the season changes to kind of usher in the new season. But then on top of that, I would imagine there are smaller events, or perhaps that one that starts as the season changer could potentially hang around for longer and be more devastating to a certain area.
Mhm. Yeah.
seasons affect the graphics for some of the mobs. So I'm
Mhm.
wondering if that will also affect what they drop
I hope
in
so.
terms of what's available
Yeah.
when.
He's big on economy, so I would, yeah. I mean, I would hope that that plays a role. That you have
Yes.
one week to gather your special hides, and then you have to wait 3.
Instead of dry goblin leather, you get soggy goblin leather.
Mhm.
Where do the goblins get their leather from? Don't ask.
And then I believe also they commented on elevation wise, right? So lower areas will collect pools of water.
Yes.
Because I remember talking about, I hope it's not like a static thing that every spring that very same spot is always a puddle.
Well, if nothing changes about that area, it's locked in the same tier that it had been in. The influence hasn't changed much. Events haven't really gone, too wildly in the area since the last time. It could be that a puddle appears in the same spot because, in the real world, areas where shallow sort of slopes will lead to, an area where something will pool up. Sure, you're going to always find water there. It's a watering hole, seasonal watering hole sort of thing. But should it always be the same size? Should it always be the same level of access? Should it always have or not have a bunch of those anglerfish critters walking around and living in it, waiting for you? So there's so much that they can do with it, even if it is relatively the same spot where it appears.
Now I hope that there's some intermingling with characters, similar to Throne and Liberty. So Throne and Liberty also has some climate related changes. So if there's a lightning storm, for example, spells that have to do with lightning are more powerful, or maybe they become AE effect spells rather than in a rain, in a rainstorm, for example. I think wind does impact arrows as well. So you will get longer volleys if you're, shooting with the wind. And I think players can even actually control weather to a degree once every so often. But
Yeah, so we're definitely supposed to have weather affecting certain spells. Um, I would definitely like to. I don't think we've gotten confirmation that players will be able to affect weather using abilities, but I hope so. Or not, it doesn't even necessarily have to be abilities. Maybe they built shrines or something like that to
and
weather
then
effect.
we get to June, and it's just the basic weapon attack update, which was pretty boring after all of these pretty cool stuff. It's just the basic weapon attack. I don't really have much to say that. Combat is combat. So
Ha, ha, ha.
There's a lot to show with combat. There's a lot to see with combat, but there's also a lot that's still being worked on. And yeah, I'm still very curious to see a lot of what they've got planned.
Ash's combat sucks.
Yeah, that's what I keep hearing. But every time I try to like parse out all of what I see, it's like, it just looks like DCUO combat. And honestly, that was a pretty fun game. I can dig that.
everybody wants BDO type combat.
Oh well.
They want this really fast paced type, but that's really never anything that was promised. It's always been discussed as a hybrid. You're going to start basically with tab targeting. You can spec into more action type skills, but it was never commented on as this is an action combat MMO like that. That's unless I'm misremembering. I don't remember that ever being explicitly stated.
I don't believe they ever said it will be 100% combat or optional, or 100% action, or optionally 100% tab target. But it always sounded like it was a hybrid, that it was meant to be. We want to do as much to accommodate both.
But we're not here for combat anyways. So
No, you're not. I would plan to smash a lot of things.
Is that when they introduced the fighter?
yeah, that was the melee video.
And that hammer strike is very unnatural for a fighter. That hammer strike should be only for a cleric. Doesn't make sense for a fighter. It's unnatural.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah,
saying.
At least that's what they say on the forums.
Yes.
yeah. I don't agree. People can have their opinions, and opinions can be.
I'm laughing because I am one of those people that thinks if the melee person has a sword, it looks weird that a hammer comes down, but that's fine. I'm not going to be playing that character anyways. So
Yeah, it's
whatever.
I will say, as I've said on the past 2 episodes, just make it look like a more warrior hammer and not so pretty and dainty and clericy, and it's just fine. But I do like the idea, like you said, of having it maybe look like the weapon you're actually holding, like a projection of the model, essentially. But that's a whole lot of art asset you'd have to deal with, or otherwise find a way that you can take the likeness of a piece of equipment that someone has and project the outline of it, which, now that I think about it, that's actually a really neat shader effect that I'm sure some one of the 3D designer, technical artist people would be like, yeah, oh, I could knock that out in one sprint and it'd just be done, and we just have that for the rest of the project. So, they could do that actually. Now
Yeah,
that I
but
think about it.
it's an archetype. It's a primary archetype ability, not a weapon ability. So
Correct.
Anyways, then we get to July, and they showed the desert biome. This is where we got the Tulnar as well revealed, and they kind of highlighted a tech tool, which was kind of a sculpting / art tool that they were actually able to use within UE5, which I think again streamlined. I still wish I could ask them that question: how much has this really just improved your workflow? Being able to do all these things with UE5.
The nice sort of thing they were saying, if I'm not mistaken, that there's somewhat of a procedural aspect to the tool, and that's not to say that they click between 2 points and an entire dungeon is generated, but it's that it's a tool that's going to give you a little nuance and variance and stuff that makes sense in the context of all of the materials and all of the shapes that are in that space. So when you're dragging that tool around and kind of making some changes, it's not like you have to individually push and pull each and every little vertex to make it exactly how you want it, but it's going to give you kind of a range that you can kind of play around with till you get exactly what you're looking for. So it's not that they're using it as a tool that does the work for them, but the proper use of procedural generation and AI and stuff, the whole, an artist's touch that it's just another tool in your arsenal sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they had a sort of clay sculpt, sandstone or something. It was in the desert because they were showing the desert biome.
The stand mommy or whatever.
Yeah, and they commented on that they could kind of procedurally create 7 or 8 different ones from that initial one that all had different broken areas, sand worn in specific spots, coloration different.
I mean, they can make as many variants as they want, but if 8's what they're going to settle on, then they're going to, keep on rolling the dice until they find the ones they like. And then once they've got 8 of them, good to go. I don't know in the code base how they've got things set up, if it's also like just a common asset that you're then just kind of running a set of modifiers on, or if they're all being spit out as their own individual assets. And then I also don't know, from a technical standpoint, would that even matter?
The desert biome looked pretty. Oh, sorry, Diggs, you're about to say something.
I'm actually going back a little bit. I was gonna say that weather moving from region to region is something that I think Omwa would be interested in. But I think Snipe Hunter would be working on implementing that if Snipe Hunter were working on the game. I think
Oh,
Ombwa is more focused on quests for this particular job that he's doing with Ashes. But it sounds like something that Ombwa and Snipe Hunter would implement in their game.
a Snipe Hunter would like go through and get like solar system modeling tools and start from there and make like how all the moons and stars and planets and everything. Like he literally did that for the game that doesn't need to be mentioned anymore. So
we can mention it.
yeah, I guess it's dead in the water now.
I mean, you're not gonna. It's it's not Beetlejuice. It's not like you're gonna summon some evil character. Well, maybe
Yeah, for anybody who knows the game we're talking about or doesn't, it's Chronicles of Illyria, which at this point lawsuit ended, but then it got appealed and doesn't sound like there's a road forward for fighting the appeal. So great. So much for that.
And the desert biome, though, I was going to say that actually did look also pretty good. They showed, I think, different variations. Now, my comment, if I remember right at the time, was to have deserts be specifically different from each other and not contain all of the different variations.
Please, thank you. I hate that every game basically does some mashup of the Gobi Desert and the approximately Arizona. That you've got the Red Rock Bluffs, you've got the Saguaro Cacti, and then you've got sand dunes as far as the eye can see. And let me tell you, those are on opposite sides of the world from each other. They are not. That is not the same place. I want to blame Warner Brothers because they did a good job of doing the Gobi Desert with Saguaro Cacti as approximately their desert environment. And I can see how that might have influenced, generations of impressionable folks. But I assure you, deserts are very different. Anza Borrego is beautiful. It's blooming. There's little things popping up all across everywhere. All the deserts on Earth have so much biodiversity and so much going for them that just often doesn't get represented well in fantasy spaces. I especially think about WoW and their deserts, and they all look like crap. This was in vanilla when I was playing, but they just look bad. They're just so boring and desolate. It's like nothing lives here. Something would live here, but you decided nothing lives here. So great. Boring.
And then, like I mentioned, we got the Tulnar, which I need to know more of the lore because I'm very confused as to how they looked like they looked, given they were a mash of all of these different minor races, but also would include some of the major races as well that were left behind. So I'm really curious how that hierarchy ended up producing what it did. But as we found out, we will get no lore until release, or very minimal. Anyways, I'm sure we'll get a little bit more in Alpha 2, but whenever that is.
That's magic.
Yes. And then in August, we got the brand new map. So they increased the size of the map to, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, 1,200, I think, square kilometers. And 750 of that was ocean, 450 of that was just land. The land actually did not increase very much. They just added a whole lot of water. And with that became the sort of moving into this PvP direction. They removed corruption from the seas. So it's essentially open, free for all PvP once you cross a certain line in the water, which caused a lot of commotion. I think this is about the time Diggs became excommunicated from many of the community members. Now has his target on his back. So
I've always had a target on my back. What's he talking about?
Which we never really talked about when you get into that conversation. Well, why did they add so much water when it's all going to be, open combat? But
Hide stuff in the water.
Yeah.
Have plenty of room for people to do water stuff. Have room
that big. I mean,
Well, the other thing
they
is
have room.
giving room for them to make islands appear out of nowhere, or
That's true.
an offshore volcano erupts and creates an entire new zone. They, if I'm not mistaken, they don't have world wrapping, so you can't go around one side back to the other side, which implies that they can add more continents and more landmass at any given time.
Yeah. And they made it clear too, their intent was to create, have players fighting over some islands and creating these sort of sea routes for transporting goods as well. But that all really occurred more still in the area that was already there. It was more on the sides that they added a lot of water. So
Yeah. I guess maybe they want to have their own little Sea of Thieves game going on.
yeah, we'll see. I
Or,
still what?
what's the other Arcades?
Yeah.
I think that's what they're going for, but they're looking at Arcades naval combat. But
Well, considering he was big on arcades, that does make sense.
Then we get to September, and you get the basic ranged attack. So this kind of complements the June basic weapon attack. And we got to see the Ranger, who actually was pretty fun to watch. I think they showed off some pretty interesting skills. I know I started thinking about, oh, do I want to switch to a Ranger? And actually, I've played several other MMOs now with Ranger classes just to see what a bow felt like. So, but not anything big or controversial. I don't think anybody had anything too negative to say about that in the forums. October, we got to Gathering. So that is where they showed us the video of him chopping down trees. And I think the most common comment was New World did that a year ago that I saw.
Okay, chopping down trees, just a little bit more context than that. Alpha 1, there were tree nodes, which you could chop down sometimes twice in a row, but there were only specific ones. And so we were back to that MMO trope of all the wood in the world, but I can only cut the specific trees. All the stone in the world, but I can only bang these specific rocks. All the plant life and herbs in the world, but I can only gather these very specific kinds of mushrooms and flowers. And that apparently wasn't the intent. That was just how the state of things for what they were showing in Alpha 1, or it might have been the intent and they changed their intent. But
it was just basic gathering for Alpha 1.
So that is no more. Now, I don't know about rocks, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of large stony boulders that I would personally be like, dude, we're turning that into stuff. But because it's actually terrain and it's not a gatherable, you're maybe not going to get to do that. But the idea that you're actually going to be able to cut down trees, and you'll see the damn thing fall. It's not going to crush anyone. It's not going to knock down other trees like you do in Valheim, which, I love that about Valheim, that you can knock down weaker trees and have them fall into stronger trees for you. But even showing that and knowing that there's the ability to harvest the trees, it still leaves some questions. Do we have to harvest the whole tree? Can we just take some branches for the sake of ecology? Could we?
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and then with the trees, is it that some guy, not going to say who, may or may not be on the show here, is just going to go around trying to chop down all the trees? Is there going to be any sort of a limit going on where you've got to have like a team to actually cut down like big trees, and initially you're only going to have the tools and skill to get saplings and easy branches and such, and harvest a fallen log or two? Like, is that's the sort of thing that I'm kind of still waiting to see how much variance and how much room there's going to be for all of that.
Interesting. I think it's backwards because if I remember correctly, they said that as you progress in skill, you would then be able to chop down younger trees. Not the
Yeah. And that's the one I commented on the Facebook. I think I still need to go back and comment on their official forum post. But basically, that's the reverse. The Sierra Club way is the wrong way. The right way is how indigenous peoples around the world would do it, which is the things that are a living, breathing, breeding, procreating ecosystem. You leave those alone. Maybe you take a branch or two if you need, but for the most part, you're going to leave it alone. Just like you don't fish out the big fish and you don't hunt the big, 5-point bucks, because they're the ones that are going to be producing the good fish and the good bucks and, the ones that you're going to want to see in your area for generations to come. If you kill all the prime ones off, if you cut all the nice stuff down, you're just going to destroy your ecology and your wildlife, and you're going to be cutting down all of the most prime entities, and what you're going to have left with is definitely not going to be of the same caliber. So that's the thing that I'm hoping they're going to kind of reverse course, because starting with the big trees and then working your way to the small trees, that's wrong. No, that ain't it. That ain't it at all.
I will freely admit that I'm the one that said I will chop down all the trees, and I'm going to try to do that during Alpha 2, whenever we get Alpha 2, because I want to see how far I can push it and see what happens. But they showed off the trees growing back, which was neat to see. I wish they would be a bit again more random, not just the exact same spot where you try to tear, hold the tree down. I also saw, what was it, surveying, so the use of cones to better understand what's around in the ground. So, but a lot again of what we found out about harvesting was more words. Really what we saw was just the chopping down of a tree, its regrowth, and breaking up some stone. So
I think it's easier to get those graphics with UE5, so
So we'll see. Then we got to November, which is really our last, because we haven't gotten to December yet. And this was our last one, which was Constellations, the night and day cycle, priest gameplay, and then the sort of group combat, which again, this was the first.
Oh, we didn't talk about the Minotaurs.
I don't remember where that was.
That was in, was that October, or they were talking about it in October, so it might have been before. But yeah, they showed the Minotaurs, and
The range
they
attack. Yeah, right. It was September.
That they didn't just show like, all right, well, here's your standard heifer with a battle axe, good job. But no, you actually get to see the variations. You get to see the different sort of categories of minotaurs that you're going to be fighting, like the hierarchical sort of classifications and different sort of officers and stuff. I liked that. I like seeing that. I think everybody kind of liked the denier armor just strapped to a board as their shield.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Little skulls flying around.
All the skulls, yeah.
Near shield.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh yeah, that's when we had the skull beards. Yeah,
Yep. Skull beards.
That makes absolutely no sense, but
Yep.
That's
the
fine.
hair that grows from the bone. It probably hurts like hell to pull one of those out.
But yeah, so back in November, so some pretty neat stuff with the constellations, the day-night cycle, but completely shadowed by the combat that not everyone, but a lot of vocal people were very unhappy about. Was clearly the first stream where I felt like it was very, very much, at least what has been posted, a negative reaction. Usually it's just a bunch of fans, oh, this looks great, can't wait. This was very, and it continues. It continues in Reddit. It continues, I think, on the forums. Um, I'm curious to see if there will be any response and what that might be. This might be a time where Steven just has to come out and say, you know what, this is just what it is. And if it's not for you, then sorry. Because I'm tired of
Well,
I'm going to continue to demo the combat myself. I don't care what you say.
I don't mind I enjoy seeing the demos and seeing people do the thing, but at the same time we and this has come up in the past couple episodes as well. I'd like to see a little bit more just like isolated videos of the different mechanics they want to show off. I didn't feel like I got a good understanding of the weight and feeling and damage mitigation and risk reward of using active block. That here's active block, it's a thing, but as far as I know, it's a position the model can get in, and that's all they've implemented of it. I want to see more. I want to know more. Tell me more about it. I'm glad that it's an active block and not that you're walking around with a stat block strapped to your left arm that has a chance to block things for you. That never sat right with me. And I'll say again, they've got people on the team that strap in heavy armor and put on a shield and put on a sword and go bang with other people that wear similar attire. Let me tell you, that dude's trying to block everything. It is not a proc chance sort of thing. Actively blocking stuff. If you didn't block it because someone got a little hatchet blade on the top of your shield and pulled it down and they came around from the other side and whacked you, well, you earned that bruise or contusion on your arm because that's what happened because you let the dude take your shield down. But yeah, I'm glad that there's active block. I just want to see and know more about it. Is it full damage mitigation and a hit to stamina? Is it partial increased damage mitigation compared to just taking it right in the face? What's the length and breadth? What's active blocking with double daggers versus active blocking with a tower shield? Like, they're going to be different. Is your double daggers going to have like a different sort of variance? Is that going to be maybe the timing thing, that not so much an active block that you're holding as much as get it at the right time when the swing's coming in and you'll like do a little disarm or dodge out of the way or something? I'd love to see more about that and know more about that.
And then lastly, in the mix of all this year, we had Extra Life again, their 24-hour stream, and we had the AMA, the Reddit AMA that Steven did, in which he unveiled all of the artisan classes and also discussed active crafting, which again, we've not seen. So
did either of you watch Extra Life this year?
I was watching it kind of on the side, so I wasn't really like super paying attention to it. I know there were some lore reveals and some stuff. I feel like I kind of do want to go back through and watch it, see how the campaign resolved and everything.
Did you contribute as much as you have in the past?
I've never really been big on their Extra Life stuff. I'll watch it after the fact. But
I appreciate that they do it.
Yeah.
I think last year I might have had them throw in an item or an enemy, but not this year. I just kind of kept things in my pockets because I wanted to get a new system, which I did.
Yeah, generally
I haven't built it yet, but I got the hardware.
Oh, I'd be putting that shit together now.
Yeah,
waiting on.
Yeah. I wanted to manage all my data first because I don't want to have 9 years worth of unsorted data that I don't go back to because I got a new toy to play with.
Very true. So the last thing, I guess, for now, we're over time. 2023. If you one thing, pick one thing that you want in 2023 from Ashes of Creation. Two things. I'll say two things because I already know what one of them is probably going to be for everyone. So I'll start Alpha 2, and I would
I
like
think
to.
that's 2024.
I would like to see a roadmap. I don't want dates. I want to know what are their targets, where what are their successes, what are their future successes, because a lot of this does just seem to get pulled along. I don't think we'll get that because that's been something that's been asked for quite some time. But I think it feels like after they had their sort of Alpha 1 issues, there's been no further discussion of timelines or any of that. So,
Well,
More of the same is fine for me.
I'm definitely hoping to see Alpha 2, but I for reasons people might understand, I'm hoping to see the budget resolve with a flurry of new jobs at all levels. Because for the past year, it's been a lot of seniors and leads that they've been looking for. And the positions that weren't seniors and leads seem like they were ones that were otherwise fairly specialized to the point that, it would be a senior leads level of experience. Like, somebody doing security for Unreal Engine MMOs. Like that sounds like a kind of niche thing where it's not like, there's juniors and seniors, floating around. There's like a selection of people that you can choose from that, may or may not apply. And, being an on-site studio in a hybrid work environment, I can see how it would be a little bit difficult, getting some of the people for some of the positions that they're looking for. Because the office is not in the cheapest place in the United States, far from it. So there's a lot of considerations, not just, this is going to be a good project to work on and, a good use of the person's skills, but, being willing to move to the area. So that's, I don't expect that they're going to change to hybrid and, that they don't have a reason to. But what it is that I'm kind of hoping to see is more of the jobs opening up at all levels so that folks who have been kind of on the outside looking in can finally have a shot at getting in on the action. I would imagine getting close to Alpha 2 and then likely after Alpha 2, the content churn is going to ramp up the amount of content that they're going to need for all the players to be able to play on for years and, have satisfying experiences, because it's not a sandbox and it's not the same experience over and over and over. And the closest you might get to that is doing something on a server and then trying to do it faster on a different server, which don't rely on or expect that being a thing, because all of the conditions that may have led to what you did on one server could be completely blown out in the first 3 months on a different server, and you wouldn't know, because a lot of that stuff is kept very secretive and close to the heart. They're not going to reveal all the hookups and all the pathways and avenues that can occur. They want people to find them naturally. And so they're going to need a lot of content people to make all of that. And, it's going to be a lot of work.
Need a lead game designer. That's the only thing I want for 2023 is to hire a lead game designer.
Somebody with that official title again. Yes, I get you.
I would also like to see actual crafting. That would be nice to see some, especially if they're active crafting. So, all right. Well, one last thing to say, I guess, before we wrap up and come back in January. There is a live show, a dev stream on the 23rd. I actually pulled up a post from Roshan on what that is, just so everyone has their expectations set. He said, our goal for the December live stream isn't showing new gameplay or making any major announcement. While you may see gameplay, it probably won't be new to you if you're watching every monthly update. For this live stream, we want to show a bit of our studio and let people get to hear more from more devs at the studio. They may talk about what they're working on or how they approach game design, but I know that's not the same as seeing it. So don't expect any alpha announcements. Don't expect any new things to pop up. This honestly seems a little bit like the reaction, like a response to everyone complaining that Steven's always on there doing stuff, which is legit. People were complaining about. It's drives me crazy because it's his game. But anyways, yeah, expectation setting. So. Well, that being said, we will not be here next Sunday because that is Christmas, and we will show up hopefully early January. So everyone have a great holiday, and we will see you back here soon enough.
Yep, that sounds good. I hope everybody has a good holiday season and New Year's here. Light them up. Make sure you check all your electrical outlets before you plug all your trees and everything in, because yeah. Electronics, everybody.
I knew that was going to happen. He froze.
Oh no.
That is how we will end this year.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. All right. See you later, everybody. Have a good one.